Hello everyone and welcome to my channel YNR Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. This revelation is so dark and ominous that even longtime residents of Genoa City will be stunned. The young and the restless has never seen a surprise as shocking as this one. The terrible finale of Matt Clark's startling comeback as Mitch Bacall has finally arrived, and Sienna Bacall's revelation has completely upended her world. She is not married to the man she has been sleeping next to, believing in and protecting. He is a killer and imposter who killed the genuine Mitch and literally wore his face to live his life. When Sienna removes Mitch's skin mask and confronts the monster she once believed to be familiar with, the terrible reality is revealed. Little irregularities that only Mitch's close friends could see were the first signs of it all. For weeks, Sienna had been ignoring her discomfort. Mitch's speech had a peculiar cadence, his perfume had a slightly different scent, and he occasionally forgot aspects about their past that Mitch would always remember. He misidentified the island when she asked him about their honeymoon in Greece. He took too long to respond when she brought up his mother's favorite perfume. Sienna's instinct told her that something wasn't right with her spouse, but she didn't want to believe it. Mitch had been her pillar of support, and the person who helped her rebuild after she had already experienced enough grief in her life. However, when the fissures widened, her denial broke, and the nightmare started. After Nick Newman began investigating the mystery behind Noah's vehicle accident, the truth began to come to light. He started to suspect that Mitch Bacall was involved in the tragedy, and that it wasn't an accident at all. However, Nick was unaware that Mitch wasn't actually Mitch. It was Matt Clark, a ghost from the darkest past of Genoa City, a name linked to unimaginable cruelty, obsession, and retaliation. Although Matt had previously risen from the grave, this time he had done so in a completely different way. His retaliation was about possession as much as devastation. He desired all of Mitch's possessions, including his company, money, influence, and most terrifying of all, his wife. Sienna noticed how chilly Mitch had grown behind closed doors. An unsettling remoteness took the place of the warmth and sensitivity that formerly characterized their relationship. He would frequently gaze at her with calculation rather than love, as though he were researching her, learning about her, and evaluating every action. Their former closeness turned into a machine, and when she saw blood on his cuff one evening, he said it was from a cooking mishap, but his justification didn't fit the cold tone of his voice. Although Sienna made an effort to dispel her worries, doubt had already been sown. The terrible reality didn't start to come to light until she discovered the secret chamber in their bedroom closet. Sienna found a small, sealed box, latex adhesives, phony IDs, and surgical instruments inside. She opened it with trembling hands and saw something she could never have predicted: a chunk of artificial flesh. Her heart ceased to beat. It appeared to be a portion of a face due to its form and texture. She retreated in fear, yet fear and curiosity drew her back. It struck her like a bolt of lightning when she touched it and realized it was a prosthetic. Mitch wasn't the person he claimed to be. Her spouse had assumed the identity of another person. Unable to contain herself any longer, Sienna made the decision to confront him the following evening. She poured him a drink and attempted to act normal while waiting for him to return from work, her nerves tense. She was quivering with barely held dread every time she spoke. With her eyes darting to his, she eventually replied, "You've been different. Are you not my spouse?" He remained silent for a minute. Then a slow, menacing smile that had nothing to do with Mitch Bacall appeared on his lips. The only sound in the room was Sienna's heart thumping. The man she had been lying next to started laughing, a chilly, twisted laugh that resembled Matt Clark's tone, making it difficult for her to breathe. "What exposed me?" His voice shifted just enough to break the illusion as he taunted. "Was it the way I kissed you, or was it the cologne?" The mask of falsehood started to come off, both physically and figuratively, and Sienna froze, the room spinning around her. The unimaginable occurred as she lunged at him and grabbed his face. The edge of what she believed to be flesh hooked her nails, but it peeled away to reveal something hideous underneath. A flap of fake flesh fell loose, revealing Matt's real face beneath, and she let out a horrified scream. Half of his face was still Mitch's, and the other half was the monster, as the hideous flesh mask dangled from his cheek. When the truth was revealed, Sienna staggered backward, her screams resonating throughout the home. As Matt tore the remaining mask off of himself and slammed it on the ground, his eyes grew icy. "You had to know eventually," he continued in a menacing tone. "But this is not how you were supposed to find out." Sienna was trembling violently. Her husband's murder and identity theft, as well as the fact that she had unintentionally shared her life, bed, and secrets with a murderer, were all too much for her to comprehend. When she attempted to flee, Matt firmly grasped her arm. He said, "You pay attention to me. I didn't kill Mitch in vain." His words pierced her like a knife. "I killed him because he had what I wanted, and now so do I." He drew her in close, making her meet his gaze. "You ought to express gratitude to me. Without me, you would never have experienced true love." Anger and incredulity blended with Sienna's tears. She spat. "You're sick. Why did you kill him? To pretend? To put his skin on?" Unfazed, Matt grinned. "Mitch lacks strength. You weren't worthy of him. His life was not anything he deserved. However, I do." Sienna understood in that moment that she had to leave, no matter the cost. Gathering all her might, she broke away from his hold by slamming her knee into his stomach. Matt snatched her once more and threw her against the wall as she ran towards the door. She lost her breath as a result of the contact and collapsed to the ground, stunned. Matt knelt next to her, false flesh and smeared prosthetic glue covering half of his face. He snarled, "You're not going anywhere. You now know too much." With shattered glass, ripped skin, and bloodstains on the ground, the scene was chaotic. Sienna stabbed at him, cutting his arm, using the closest object she could locate, a piece of the broken wine glass. She had the opportunity to flee when he howled in agony. Fearful and crying, Sienna ran into the night while barefoot and bleeding, her recollection of Matt's uncovered face etched in her mind. Nick, back at the Newman Ranch, was becoming increasingly skeptical by the hour. He had discovered that Mitch had made a number of dubious calls to persons with criminal histories, fabricated financial records, and diverted money from Noah's club idea. Nick knew he had to take action the night of Noah's collision when he saw a picture of Mitch's vehicle close to the canyon. Unaware that Sienna was already in grave peril, he proceeded directly to her home. The scene that greeted Nick when he stormed in was straight out of a nightmare. The house was in ruins, blood was on the floor, and a ripped piece of the mask was laying close by. Horrified by what he saw, he scooped it up. "Oh my God," he muttered. "What on earth took place here?" A few moments later, Sienna staggered back into the house, her hands trembling and her face pallid. She sobbed, "He's not Mitch. He's not Mitch, Nick." Before Nick could comprehend what was happening, a shadow moved behind him. Matt then leaped out of the shadows and hit Nick across the back of the head. Nick crashed into the wall as a result of the blow. The room was filled with Matt's icy, unrecognizable voice. "Newman, you ought to have stayed out of this." However, Nick was not easily defeated. He tackled Matt despite feeling lightheaded, sending them both sprawling to the ground. A vicious altercation broke out, with fists flying, furniture shattering, and years of rage and retaliation bursting in one vicious fight. In the wavering light, Matt's sweaty, half-peeled face appeared hideous. "What is already dead cannot be killed." Nick was slammed into the wall by Matt's roar. However, Nick struck back, punching Matt so forcefully that he stumbled backward and fell over the coffee table. As Matt collapsed and struck his head on the fireplace's corner, Sienna let out a scream. After that, there was a horrible silence that pervaded the space. Breathing heavily, Nick stared at Matt's still corpse on the ground. The falsehoods, the man, and the mask were all visible. Sienna sobbed hysterically as she fell next to the old picture of the real Mitch on the mantel. The monster that had destroyed everything had taken the place of the man she loved. The residence was immediately overrun by police and paramedics. The horror was evident as Chance Chancellor got on the scene. He remarked somberly, "This wasn't just identity theft. This was psychological warfare." The mask was gathered as proof, and subsequent DNA testing proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Matt Clark had killed Mitch Bacall weeks prior, disposed of the body, and taken over his life using a prosthetic disguise. Sienna was still troubled by what she had witnessed when the dust fell. The sound of Matt's laughter, the picture of his face pulling away, and the sense of betrayal that consumed her were all unavoidable. She reported to Sharon that she could still hear him calling her name in her sleep. She sobbed and added, "He wore my husband's face. I believed him because he put on his face." The Genoa City community was devastated in the aftermath. Everyone Matt Clark came into contact with was devastated by his reign of terror once more. Knowing that even though Matt was thought to be dead, monsters like him had a way of resurfacing, Nick determined to keep Sienna safe. The camera remained on the mortuary, where a covered body lay motionless on the slab, as the show drew to an end. However, a faint sound, a heartbeat, echoed in the chilly chamber as the attendant turned to go. Everyone who was in close proximity to the pandemonium caused by Matt Clark's unmasking was left with an invisible stain. The shockwaves continued to reverberate through Genoa City like aftershocks from an earthquake, even after the terrible truth that Matt had slain Mitch Bacall and stolen his identity was finally revealed. Sienna Bacall was no longer merely a victim of deceit. She was now tormented by the horrifying recollection of removing her husband's face and discovering a murderer underneath. The terror she had experienced was beyond the comprehension of anyone in town. And even worse, she continued to worry if Matt might still be alive. The police reports were terrifyingly detailed. Everything had been meticulously prepared by Matt. Before killing Mitch Bacall, he had spent months studying him, mimicking his speaking habits, mannerisms, and his signature style. In order to remove Matt Clark from all databases, he had bought off a dishonest medical examiner to fabricate documents indicating that he had been cremated years prior. He obtained sophisticated silicone facial prosthetics and speech modulation technology, with the aid of an underground identity broker, enabling him to fully inhabit Mitch Bacall. He had taken control of his home, his company, and, most unsettling of all, his marriage, tricking Sienna into thinking her husband was still alive. It was psychological possession, not just murder. The Bacall estate turned into a nightmarish location in the weeks after Matt appeared to have died during his violent altercation with Nick Newman. Sienna declined to spend the night there. The closet where she discovered the surgical instruments, the mirror where Mitch bid her good night, and the bed that still had a hint of his scent all served as reminders of the deceit. Knowing that the tragedy was too much for her to handle on her alone, Sharon offered to let her stay at her house for a while. However, Sienna was unable to fall asleep even in Sharon's guest room. The mask would half slide off Matt's face and reveal the monster underneath each time she closed her eyes. Nick, on the other hand, was unable to get over his guilt. He felt accountable for not seeing it earlier and for failing to make the connection prior to Noah's mishap. He had always knew Matt Clark was dangerous, but he didn't realize how insane his desire for vengeance might go. In an attempt to find any last traces of Matt's ideas, Nick started going over every action he had taken as Mitch. He discovered that Matt had used offshore accounts to swindle almost $500,000 from Mitch's business. Additionally, he learned that Matt had been extorting a Los Angeles plastic surgeon, the same one who had made the skin mask he used to pass for Mitch. Chance Chancellor investigated the trail and discovered something even more unsettling. Matt had been exchanging texts with an unidentified accomplice known only as Ghostmaker, suggesting that Matt wasn't working alone on his plot to invade Genoa City. "If I don't make it out, continue the plan," was the final message sent prior to the final confrontation with Nick. "She is overly knowledgeable." Everyone shuddered at the message. Ghostmaker was who? And what was the ongoing plan? Chance discovered that Matt's influence went beyond than anyone had anticipated as he probed deeper. Forged insurance claims, shadow corporations, and fake records were dispersed throughout several states. Retaliation against Nick and Sienna wasn't the only goal. Matt has been preparing a larger scheme to undermine the Newman family and all others associated with them. Sienna's mental health kept becoming worse in the meantime. She started to see Matt's face everywhere, including in her nightmares, in crowds, and in reflections. Occasionally, she would wake up screaming, believing that he was murmuring her name while standing at the foot of her bed with his mask half off. Even Sharon was unsure, despite her best efforts to reassure her that Matt had left. Strangely, the autopsy had yielded no definitive results. It was hard to visually identify the body that was found from Sienna's home due to the severe damage caused by the fall. DNA tests revealed a match to Matt Clark, but as Chance noted, Matt was an adept manipulator. It is possible to fabricate DNA evidence. Strange things started to happen very quickly. Sienna received a package at her door in the first instance. There is no return address. There was only one thing inside. A tiny, hauntingly familiar piece of silicone and a message in Mitch's handwriting that said, "You only peeled away one face, darling. There are further ones." With her body shaking violently, Sienna dropped the bundle. Nick and Chance came running to her aid as soon as she called them. As Nick read the note, his face went white. He said, "This is him." Chance disagreed, saying, "He's still out there." He had a suspicion that the enigmatic accomplice might be carrying out Matt's duties, or possibly setting him up to maintain the terror. Another disturbing finding was made a few days later. Matt's body vanished hours later, but security footage from the mortuary showed a person in a maintenance uniform entering the storage area. After being discovered asleep, the attendant on duty that evening claimed to have been drugged. The consequences were terrible. Matt Clark's body had vanished. The residents of Genoa City were living in silent fear by this point. Like wildfire, rumors spread. Some people thought Matt was still alive and wearing a different stolen face. His accomplice had taken over his work, others said. One thing was certain, though. Sienna was still being observed. At strange hours, her phone would ring, and when she answered, the only sound coming from the other end was breathing. Occasionally, she would discover doors she was certain she had locked standing open, and a distorted voice would mutter, "You can't hide what's under your skin." Even if the bottle had been thrown away, Mitch's old perfume would still have a lingering aroma. She would also hear the faint sound of footsteps outside her window every night when she woke up. Nick took on the role of her unwavering guardian, staying over at her house to make sure she wasn't by herself. The dread strengthened their relationship and rekindled their intense closeness from years earlier. He reassured her that Matt was capable of anything and that she wasn't insane. However, Nick was also aware of the horrifying fact that creatures like Matt Clark never truly perish. The breaking point then arrived. When Sienna got home one evening, her bedroom had just one candle lit. Another mask, the same one she had torn from Matt's face, was lying on her bed. A message that said, "Let's finish what we started," was attached. The house went dark that same evening due to a power outage. Before Sienna could get on the phone to call Nick, she heard the distinct sound of footsteps behind her. With her heart pounding, she cautiously turned and noticed a shadow creeping over the wall. The outline of a man. "Mitch," she muttered. "Matt."